Welcome to Rick's Europe. A couple weeks ago, Riggs went all the way to Dublin to shoot a documentary about the biggest issue that Ireland is facing, which is mass migration and its obsession with open borders by its politicians. There is a housing crisis going on that is getting out of control. People are fearing within their own community as the rate of crime is going up with the increase of illegal migrants entering the country. The own people of Ireland have built up the country are being pushed aside, and it's happening under a government that is so obsessed with welcoming and taking care of everyone except their own people. Now, the Irish people, they're fed up, they're done with it, and they're going to protest. There's a national protest going on the 6th of June in Cork. It's one of the many that we've seen in the past. Because enough is enough and people are done with being overlooked. To really get a better understanding, I am so happy to have with me on the show Fatima Gunning. She is an incredible journalist from Gript Media. Fatima, I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you, Scarlett. I'm really, really happy to be speaking to you again. There's a lot. You really gave a lot of the points in your intro, but there is a lot happening in Ireland, and unfortunately, we have creaking systems. We have a creaking housing system, a creaking healthcare system, even the education system, and in those circumstances, our government has decided to operate what is, in effect, really an open border policy, where we had over 100,000 Ukrainians come in. I think the Irish people want to support Ukrainians. They feel that there is a need to help people who are in trouble. But I think that the way it's been handled and the numbers have been incredibly irresponsible, in that you're essentially inviting limitless numbers of people into a country where there's nowhere to house them all. And on top of the, 100,000 plus Ukrainians who have come in since the beginning of the war, there are also thousands of other asylum seekers. So these are people who are claiming international protection, many of whom, it has to be said, are economic migrants who want to skip the queue. We have people coming in from places like Georgia, which is a country that is not at war. Nigeria is not at war. And we have these people coming in and saying that they are, there would be refugees. And while it's very unclear what exactly they're fleeing from, and numbers suggest that as many as 80% of them were actually coming from the UK, which is not at war, as we know.
Fatima, you're very on the subject. You've been following it very closely. What are actually the statistics? How many migrants has been coming into Ireland? Given in fact, you're a beautiful island but a tiny population. How big is the issue when we talk about the numbers?
At the moment, 22% of the population is foreign born. So demographically, that's a huge shift for us, because until about 2004, migration into Ireland wasn't really a thing. It was a very homogenous society. And then I think it was the Nice Treaty. It was agreed that workers from Eastern Europe would come in, and a lot of workers from places like Poland, Latvia, Lithuania came, and were mostly working in construction and that kind of thing. And that was kind of like the first wave of migration. And I think that was absorbed a lot better than what's happening now, simply because really those people, they kind of look like us. They come from pretty Catholic countries. The behavioral standards, or the kind of the moral, the ethics that they believe are kind of quite similar to what we believe in general. So that was quite smooth, I think it's fair to say. However, since around kind of 2016, the kind of the migrant crisis, the whole situation with Germany, like Angela Merkel bringing in 1 million people, all that kind of stuff, Ireland has started to experience large waves of immigration from countries that are unfortunately, very dysfunctional, places like Somalia, Nigeria, there are places where people are used to, I would say, a very different way of life than we are used to here in Europe. And that has caused quite a lot of tension, particularly in circumstances where a lot of these people, thousands in fact, are coming in on either fake documents or having destroyed their identity documents. So there have been cases where people who have committed violent crimes have been brought before the courts here, and our national police force don't know who this person is. So you might want to ask yourself, how does somebody travel across borders and come to an island in Western Europe and no one knows who they are. They obviously needed to get here by some kind of method of transport that does require an identity document to board. So there's obviously something like pretty fishy going on.
So how does that work? Do they just throw away their passport the moment they arrive, or is there just no control whatsoever? It's literally open border without any checking of documents whatsoever.
No, so like they obviously have to, if they're coming in on a plane, they obviously have to present a valid travel document to get on the plane. And I have seen myself traveling from Europe back to Ireland that, you know, the staff, I usually fly Ryanair. I see the staff checking them quite rigorously, like where you have to have an actual travel document, because, you know, airlines can be fined if they are ferrying people who do not have a right to go to their country, the destination country. So what seems to be happening is that a lot of them, they get here, they have the passport, and between the disembarkation point of the plane and the customs check, the immigration check, which is quite a few meters away, and they lose their passport. They flush it down the toilet, they leave it on the airplane, they rip it up, put it in the bin. There was actually a case of a man who came before the courts this week, a Palestinian man who ate the biometric page of his passport when he was confronted by, I believe it was an immigration official or at least someone at the airport. He tore it up and ate it. So the Gardaí don't, the National Police Force here, don't actually know exactly who this person is.
This is such a wild story that I almost find it impossible to believe. Like it sounds like it comes out of a movie. I totally believe you that these practices are happening. I want to touch upon something that you said earlier about the type of people that are coming into your country. A lot of them are coming actually from very safe countries. Somalia is one of them. I've met with this incredible gentleman. He was just a hardworking guy with a beautiful family, with a very deep, profound love for his country. And I was so impressed, you know, like he had a long day of working. We went to this local pub. We ordered a Guinness, of course, because that's what you do when you're in Dublin. And I was like, oh, you know, the people here around so well. He said, yeah, because that's my colleague. And I was thinking, you just had a full day of working like your colleague, and his colleague is going to a pub to do an extra night shift. And he said, yes, well, it's the only way to come around. And then we were walking around, he was telling me, you know, we work sometimes double shifts just to make means ends to provide for our families. Then you see the Somalians. I mean, he was just giving an example of one of the cultural identities. They're doing nothing the whole day. You see them drinking, having fun, doing whatever is actually prohibited by Allah, by the Quran. They're living off this welfare state that is being provided by the hardworking people that are now actually working 2 shifts to provide for this, you know, lifestyle for the Somalis. That is incredibly painful to hear. You would expect a government to be there in the interest of its own people. And what is happening to Irish, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is that they want to take care of everyone and everybody except for their own people. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think that sentiment is very much widespread at this point. If you, like, people see like they're struggling to support their families. You know, we have people, like I have friends who are very highly educated. They work in jobs that you would think that they could afford to support themselves in any way that they need, and yet they're going overseas to places like Brussels to be able to afford a home because they can't get a mortgage here. They've made it so incredibly difficult to access basic things like housing and other services as well. And yet, as you pointed out, the government is operating a system where people can come in from places who have absolutely no ties to this country whatsoever, have not paid a penny in taxes. No, their family has no tie to this island. Their family hasn't contributed, and they can come in and essentially be housed overnight on the taxpayer. That is happening, and it has been happening for quite a few years at this point, and it has led to a huge sense of resentment. And it's not just that. It's not that these people are being housed in vacant homes that were available that no one here needs. What's actually happening is, in many cases, with the IPAS system, that's the International Protection Accommodation Service system, is that they're closing down local amenities that Irish people need, like hotels, to house what are predominantly men from like men, like the kind of the men-apt countries, like the Africa, North Africa, like Middle East, those kind of, quite dysfunctional regions. So there is a huge hotel, for example, it's called City West. It was the largest hotel, I believe, in Dublin. It's kind of near the airport, Dublin Airport, which is also very busy. And the government, during the COVID lockdowns, it was made into one of those, I think it's called a quarantine centre. But now it's basically functioning as a huge asylum hub. So the closure of that hotel has taken away 764 beds from tourists in Dublin. And, recently the local people in that area, the area around it is called Sagart. They've taken to the roads literally and done a kind of like a sit down on the motorway protest where they just go and stop their cars in the middle of the motorway to try and get attention. And I think it's really important to say as well that these people haven't just been like, right, lads, let's get on the motorway. These people would have been campaigning for a long time and voicing their opposition, their concerns about the closure of this hotel and the placement of hundreds of strangers really in their community for a long, long time. The government hasn't really responded. This is a pattern it's reflected all over the country at this stage, where local people have, in some cases, kept vigil outside places that are, like, some of them are shut down. And then suddenly you see works going on. Suddenly you see bedding being brought in. It looks a bit suspicious. And then they'll find out through a mysterious process that it's actually gone bypass, that the government has actually decided to house, more than likely military age men there, people who would have come into the country, likely they're not vetted. Like, the government often misleads the Irish people by saying that people who come in claiming asylum have their fingerprints taken, which they do, and that this is run through a system called Eurodac. And what they'll do is they'll pass off Eurodac as a criminal database, when in fact it's not a criminal database. It's a database that checks if somebody has made an asylum claim in another European country or if they've made an illegal border crossing. And then my colleagues actually went and got data which revealed that this Eurodac system has not been used as part of a criminal investigation. So when an effort to find out somebody's criminal past in a a relevant way. So when the government continually flaunts Eurodac as a way of trying to assure the Irish people that no, these people are safe to have been vetted, that's just not true.
Can you tell me more about, so if I understand it correctly, there should be a register that when you enter the country, they'll take your fingerprint. With that fingerprint, they can check, have you been to a country before? Have you violated the laws there? This is just so absurd that you have this open borders policy. That's one thing that is absurd. But it's something else that you're also welcoming criminals. I mean, who's protecting Irish people then? I mean, you as a young woman, when you walk on the streets, do you even feel safe anymore?
No, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe in Dublin. And increasingly, I don't feel safe in my own area, which is like 30 minutes south of Dublin, because look, when you know that there are these horrible instances taking place, for example, there was an asylum seeker stabbed to death in Dublin recently in a pretty, what I would consider one of the safest areas of the city. This man was stabbed to death by another foreign man who, I don't know if that man was an asylum seeker or not, but it turns out that the man who died, his name was Quoham Babatunda, might be butchering that name, but he was facing rape charges in Italy. So, obviously we believe in innocent until proven guilty, but if somebody, if the Italian authorities are satisfied that there's enough evidence against somebody to bring charges against them for a serious sexual assault, you have to kind of ask how that person is able to show up in Dublin. There was an Algerian man critically injured, a broad daylight stabbing in Dublin only, I think it was the beginning of this week or late last week. The suspect in that is another foreign man, I believe Algerian. So, you're having these really disturbing instances of broad daylight violence. Now, I have to say the murder I previously mentioned was not broad daylight. That did happen in the wee hours around 2 a.m. But we are increasingly seeing, like antisocial behavior on the streets. And like we have a pre-existing problem with antisocial behavior in this country. We have a deep problem, a deep and multi-generational problem of drug abuse, particularly with regard to the inner city. So like Dublin has never been a utopia, but on top of our existing problems, the government has decided to let in thousands of unvetted men who, some of whom, not all of whom, but some of whom are causing chaos.
Yeah, and the thing is, once you start to normalize it, it becomes a pattern. We've seen it happening once, we've seen it happening twice, and your government is doing nothing about it. It's really destroying the beautiful country and island that you're having. I really want to applaud Irish people for it. I felt so welcomed. We were so welcomed with open arms. I think this is very important to stress out that Irish people are incredibly warm and open to help anyone that needs that help. But there is a limit to any hospitality. Once you start using the hospitality against people, you don't respect their rules. You start creating chaos, abusing the social systems that are there to really help those who are in need. And this, I think it's very good that we had this conversation for people to understand how severe the situation is in your beautiful country. And you were talking about protesters doing a sit down. It's very obvious that their voices need to be heard. And tomorrow on the 6th of June, there will be another protest. When usually it's the best way to make a democratic point against a current policy that is being put out by your representatives. In an ideal democracy, those representatives, they listen to you and they do something with it. For example, in this case, it would be closing borders. Do you have any faith that this rally, these protests you'll have tomorrow, will have any effect of the current situation?
I think that there was one held last month in Dublin, which attracted tens of thousands. I mean, there was a lot of squabbling over the numbers because the mainstream media, particularly the national broadcasters, seems to have a pattern of liking to downplay the numbers of people who are at the nationalist demonstration, basically. They also like to dismiss them as far-right demonstrations, when in fact the people there, they were not only protesting against mass migration, it was also just a general show of rage against the government. And it's not only migration, as I mentioned before, it's the housing crisis, it's the health crisis, it's people not being able to find places in schools for their children, it's Irish school, like we call them, it's like School Long Gaelic, where I went to one, the kids are supposed to have their education through our native language, Irish, and the government is actually placing foreign kids who, God help them, don't even speak English in these very, very specialized schools. So there's just so much rage in this country right now about what the government is doing to us, to the Irish people, almost on all fronts, it feels like. And I think after the huge demonstration in Dublin last month, there was, I would say, a sense of like a shift in tone. Because when that many people take to the streets, it's very difficult for politicians to ignore. And look, they have been doing it for the last 3 years. They've been gaslighting and ignoring and name calling. You're far right, you're racist, you're a Nazi, like all this kind of stuff. You don't belong in polite society. They've been doing all that, but the opposition to their current policies has not gone away, even in the midst of that kind of gaslighting, name calling, whatever you want to say it is. So I think that there's a sense that there are small shows of something ramping up. I mean, the new Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, is making a point of, for example, he sent a deportation flight back to Georgia, as I mentioned. There's a lot of Georgians coming over with 32 people. Now, he revoked 40 deportation orders in his first month in office, so it's actually quite questionable whether he's actually really ramping up or tightening up, things like deportation, or if it's window dressing. I think that kind of remains to be seen. But basically, a couple of days before he deported those 32 Georgians, 33 more came. So it's kind of like a zero-sum game. In the last couple of days, there was another deportation flight sent to Nigeria. I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was around 59. But look, when there are hundreds coming in and you deport 59, you're basically like shoveling water out of a sinking boat. So is the government really serious about listening to the people on this? I think that remains to be seen.
Let's hope so, because of course, like I said in the beginning, I don't think it's an issue that just Ireland is facing. It's an issue that we see in all the European countries. Like I had the pleasure of talking with you earlier this week, and you were asking me about housing crisis in the Netherlands, where I'm based, and I told you it's exactly the same. The problem that Ireland is facing is a problem that Europe is facing. I think it's incredible courageous of the people of Ireland to go tomorrow to protest, to take ownership of their democratic right. We stand with Ireland. And thank you so much, Fatima, for your time and really explaining what's going on in your country.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone who watches.